due to the diminishing stock of shad in the fisheries, I think a lot of guys just plain quit.
It's a hard job. They're out all kinds of weather and dark, and it's a hard job.
And I just took over. I just got river water in my blood.
And I've taught several people how to bone shad, and I think it's going to be a dying art, though, because nobody young wants to do it anymore.
Didn't care about money or anything else. I love to be out here.
When I was younger, we probably did 40 or 50 fish, you know, in the run of a day.
All of my friends are gone. That's the whole problem there. I don't know anybody. Nobody.
A spring was not unless you boned a shad. And some of the other fishermen, they feel the same way. You know, if we're not out on the water doing shad fishing, then it's just like it's not complete. The spring is not complete. It's almost like hearing the first peepers that I heard the other night. You know, spring is here, and the shad will soon be, you know, be coming around. I'm Dorothy Miller Goss. I grew up here in Essex, Connecticut, the daughter of a fisherman, Val Miller. My dad was a commercial who was John Valentine, which I never knew him other than Val until I was much older. Did not realize his name was John Valentine. My grandfather, James Monroe Miller, had 11 children, and he was a fisherman, but he also was a sea captain. And four of his boys did fish. So there was Jim and Gilbert and Dewey and Charlie and my dad, and they were all fishermen. Fish were boned in the cellar of the house until about 1949 when Dad, and it was a garage, and Dad turned it into a market. So we had the fish market from 1949 up until about 66 or so, and then my sister Bobby and I ran it for a couple of years. We ran it there. The years went on, and Dad no longer had the business. I would bone shad for Bill Manee. Bill and I, as kids, grew up. I mean, my dad taught him how to fish.
We used to sneak out once a week or so when I was 12 and fish all night. Skip school the next day. And did that for a few years until I was old enough to go every night. So we finagled a light, street light, and hung it on the pole out here in front to fish in. And we had a generator in the little shed behind us over here, and we just light that off and had light down here and dredge the river out and put the fill in the bulkhead that we built to build land up where we could put our nets. Dewey taught me how to mend net. We'll do that. And Charlie Miller, if he had a big tear, he'd cut a section out, and he always kept patches with little tags on them, numbered how many mesh were deep and how many mesh across. He'd square off the net in that amount of meshes, and then he'd go find a patch and then patch in. And I learned both ways, so it saved an awful lot of time after a while.
Starting in 1935, as an employee of the old Connecticut State Board of Fisheries and Game, I retired after the last 10 years as director in 1964. Connecticut was the first state in the Northeast, or anywhere that I know of, to do scientific work on shad, and that goes back to the 1920s. If you restricted it mathematically worked right out perfect. You saved 1/7 of the run.
My last position at the EP was Deputy Commissioner, which means I was in charge of the fisheries program, the wildlife program, the parks, and the forestry program. You know, there are regulations now concerning the season for shad. It starts in the early spring and ends by, I believe, June 15th. And other than that, in terms of numbers, there's no regulations that I know of. The number that a fisherman can get is pretty much limited on what's available in the river. Most people think that shad fishermen fish at night to avoid the daytime boat traffic. That might be a factor, but the real reason is that shad can see the net during the daytime and not at night, so shad fishermen fish at night.
I'm Steve Gephardt, and I'm a fisheries biologist with the state of Connecticut, the DEP Inland Fisheries Division. Shad is one of the many anadromous fish species that enter the Connecticut River. The term anadromous refers to fish that live their adult life in saltwater, enter freshwater to spawn, and after some period of freshwater life as a juvenile, then they go back out to the ocean to complete the life cycle. Often it's the Atlantic salmon the most important, because many of the expensive complex fish passage facilities up and down the valley were justified for American shad because we've always had a shad run. The shad have been here and have needed to be passed over these dams. While the salmon has gotten all the headlines, the shad has been doing all the heavy lifting, so to speak.
Four of us went over to this barn in Hamburg Cove. It was an exciting day, finding some of these nets.
Yeah, I didn't think there were any of them left.
Tim telling us that a lot of it dated over 100 years old, still in fairly good condition. A lot of them were really in excellent condition. I can remember it at my dad's, before I even boned shad, helping pack ice. They went into what we call a shad box today, and we were lucky enough to find some of those at the barn.
That looks in fairly good shape underneath there.
Yeah.
Stake net is a form of fish trap, and they have to be set with some knowledge of how the fish are apt to move in that area. It consists of a series of stakes supporting a guiding net. They're guided along it and guided into a trap. They have a funnel entrance to the trap, sometimes two, and the fish collect in the cod end of the net.
Manila head rope.
Wow.
All Manila, so pre-40,
Yep.
pre-1940 at least.
The cotton nets, they were made by a Star company here in Connecticut. Each spring the fishermen would get together and string on the corks and the sinkers, and Dad would take us and we'd go down and watch it happening. They were probably used there in the Hamburg Cove to catch the shad way back, probably, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s. Of course, they're not used any longer now. They've gone to the gill nets is what the gentlemen use now.
It would look like this. Okay, and then it would have a long leader. And here's all these stakes going in here like this to keep the leader straight. Okay? Then the guy, and of course the fish would hit that leader and go into the fight. Then some of them got very complicated, and they would put a wing wall out with more stakes. They'd put a huge wing wall on one side. Okay. And you'd all of those, you're seeing all of these stakes.
It was just a very, very exciting and interesting day for us.
We used to use a Brockway scow, our valve did. We had to rig it up with lights and whatever, and it was built by Brockway down in Saybrook.
Basically, the boat shape has remained relatively open, and they're a great river boat. I've used Brockway scows gill netting a lot.
I was very fortunate to be involved not only personally but professionally with Earl through 20 years of being a Brockway United Nations, and then lastly using some of his boat building projects in our pilot programs that
form the basis of our school today.
I kind of like the old 19-footer because it was fishing the old-fashioned way. Like we had a row every time. With the other boats, we went with power, you know, with a scow boat. We put the net over it with power and pick it up. Tommy and Jimmy Whittlesey had what we called an old one-lunger. He was about 9. It had a make and break engine in it, is what they called it in the old days, and had a big wheel on it, centrifugal wheel, to drive it. And when you wanted to back up, you had to stop the engine, turn the wheel the other way to get it start firing again, and then back up. And that was the way she worked. And that engine, that was probably in the
fishing. We would finally see them disappear one at a time. So I guess at the very end, we were about the last 2 old-timers shad fishing. And then it got so that we just couldn't stay up with it. So, bango, we had to give it up.
I come down with the Sea Scouts. 34. And went out with shad fishermen. Some of the specters paid $20, $25 a night. In those days, if you were single on WPA, you only got $12 a week. So it seemed like a lot of money could be made in shad fishing. One time we had trouble getting the net in, we were going a little bit long. We could hear the fish. They get caught in the net below the cork line and they try to swim and they go up the surface and you hear it splashing.
When the season was all over, I knew so much about fishing then that I decided I might as well go to work and sell fish. So that's when I bought a 1952 Ford pickup and made a fish box, and I would load it up with shad, and I started a fish route, the same as a baker, the milkman, house to house.
Seems about every old codger I talked to around the river has gone shad fishing at one point in his life. Shallow net, all you had to do is be able to get the net out of the boat and back into the boat without destroying it or killing yourself, and you made money. It's a different reality today. Unless you're into it full time and running a boating operation, it's just not worth doing. It just isn't worth it. There's not enough fish there. I used to eel all summer and into the fall. Seed oysterman. I did that for about 9 winters or so. Used to be part of my annual living before I went full time on the draggers. A gill net is you go by a specific dimension. Like this here, from knot to knot, is 5.5 inches. And you'll use that size to determine, you know, what size fish you want to catch. I think I'm one of the last shad boat that uses oars. It's just the way this reach is set up, I have to use the oars just to keep the net in shape. For up in this area in the river, it's pretty much what you want. This is a whole different ball game fishing up here as opposed to down where Frank is. It's just completely different. There's a lot less river. When you're hung and hung hard, which fishing with these lead lines is it's a whole different setup than with the rings. Those ring nets, they have a string on the bottom. They're just designed to just tear over whatever they tangle on because they're such long nets. They're fishing 1,500, 1,800 feet of net down there. You know, I only fish little 500-foot nets. But when you hang hard in high, fast water, it's a dangerous situation. And if you happen to get your prop in your net and then wind up SM2 with that river raging down, it'll sink your boat. That's high, cold spring water, and chances are you're gonna die.
My son and I have commercial licenses. We don't do it to make a living at it. We really don't even make any money at it. We pay expenses, but we do it to kind of keep something alive that we feel is disappearing on the Connecticut River. Our style is unique to the way we do it. We have no idea how these other people do it. We've had our nets torn right in half by boaters, and they don't have a clue. I don't think they do it intentionally. They just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, there's a shad net. Just go to the outside of those lights. Yeah, just steer. Yeah, go to the left. Follow me. Frank's been run over down there. That ended his season one year, 2 years ago. Big cigarette boat destroyed his net. There was a lot of hollering and screaming matches. There's even been fist fights on the riverbank. There was a lot of trouble. No, I'm the only guy that uses the blue light. I get most of the traffic. The light is the only passive means for stopping and educating the public as to what's going on.
The traffic on the river at night. I know the shad fishermen, especially the barge that went up the canal up there to the aircraft plant. A tug would come pushing a barge up the river and everybody would scramble to get out of their way and pick the nets up.
When I used to go out with my dad on the boats, if we saw a tug coming, you would just yell to the other fishermen, you know, tug on the way. Today they use radios, which makes it a little more safer, and they have more time to pull their nets in and save themselves. And that's how Ray Holmes lost his life. They were hit by it during the fog, but the fog was also an enemy of the shad fishermen way back then, when there was no radios to communicate with the tugboats and that sort of thing. And that is how Ray Holmes lost his boat, due to the fog and the tugboat not being able to see the fishermen, or the fishermen not being able to see the tugboat and hitting the tugboat, hitting them and tipping them over. I'm not sure why Uncle Gilbert, what happened when Uncle Dewey was with Uncle Gilbert got drowned. Probably was fog also, I would assume. I only know of a few people who are still boning shad. I have probably taught 10 or 12 people, and I think there's only like one that I know that still bones, and that's my daughter.
It's like you don't really make money now.
Boners, when everybody would have, there'd be 3 or 4 of us women boning shad, and 5 or 6, 8 kids playing in the yard or outside while we all boned shad. Because the women were home. They didn't go out and work like they are today. And I was taught by what I considered the best boner was Irene Larson.
And I've been boning shad for 62 years. In the beginning, we got about 25 cents to bone shad, and we had to clean them and get them ready. But then later on, they went up to $1 a shad. But they were already processed, and all we had to do was bone them. 25 cents to do the whole goddamn job.
We used the joke because she would say if anybody found a bone in a shad, or that she'd pay them $1 for every bone they found.
And I prided myself on the fact that I was doing it right. And as I said, if there was a bone left in one of my fish, I paid them $1.
I don't think she's ever made $1. We talked with Liz Esty, and her and Irene.
It's all a very accomplished boner. Pick was probably one of the best boners we had. I ran the odds and ends and kept the place going, and I did a lot. Stayed frozen and was in good condition, and it was an interesting time.
We probably are about the last generation that will carry on with the shad, boning that.
Yeah, this is your belly bone to clean up, and this is the fillet. This is the fillet one. This is not as flexible. It's a little more support that we need for removing these heavier bones. Get as close to the bones as we possibly can to save as much meat as possible. Then clear off the tail, this meat. And I know where to cut here because the bones there on the belly bone end at a certain place, and I'm familiar with that. Then we go to the fillet again on either side. This is a good sized fish, this one here. A total fillet when finished will probably, you can see all the bones are here. Total fillet will probably win the bones up. It's a wide bones, they have the 2 sides. Some are harder, some are softer. Fold her back.
If you hit the tide and the moon just right, everything came together on high water, you could load up on fish. And you'd only get one of them maybe once in every 3 weeks or so, or 2 weeks, whatever it was. And when everything came together at sundown. Well, in the old days, Fulton's Market and a few others down there would send the tails and then ice them and nail a cover on and ship them out, put a tag on them and ship them to New York.
I've
taken over the shad shed since 1985. My father became ill and wasn't able to do it anymore. So my sister and I took it up. It come from Rhode Island, and Mr. Meyer, he likes the fish with the bones in, split in half. Mrs. Ballack from Ballack's Nurseries across the river, she likes the whole fish with the bones in also. She says it has a much better flavor. I used to have some folks that came from Maine and New Hampshire. Most of our clientele now comes from Deep River, Chester, Essex, Haddam, Higginham, Middletown. They don't come from. Extremely difficult to bone this fish. It takes a very long time to learn the technique, and because it is such a short season, you don't have that long of a time to practice. The year, the gas prices have gone up, and customers have steadily declined over the years.
My name is Joseph Shea, and we're in the Centerbrook section of Essex, having our annual shad bake for the Rotary Club. It's a gather. There's many different levels of involvement. You can be a nailer, where you just nail the fish on the boards. You can be a fireman, where you actually tend the fire. Then we have a denailing table, where we actually take the nails out of the boards and prepare the fish ready to serve. I think the most important aspect of the shad being baked in front of a fire is that they're nailed on oak planks, and they're baked in the vertical position against the open fire. Here's where I think some folklore takes over. I'm not really sure of the basis of it, but I'm told that it's an old Indian technique where they would catch the shad right in the Connecticut River and then cook them in front of an open fire. We've probably modified things a little bit.
Is that it's been a wonderful family event over the years, and now we bring our children, and my mother has actually started it.
I eat it one time a year. This is it, and they get it up at the on the Connecticut River, and it's great.
I've had shad, and I've honed it, and if you try to bone shad, it's impossible.
It's a really nice event that the local people look forward to, and it's a tradition in this area.
Time to go home. Go home.
Whether there is a fishery itself probably depends on whether or not there are enough people around that want to spend their nights on the river hauling nets. It's a lot of work, and maybe not making very much money at it. I think it all depends on the number of people that are going to be willing to do that.
The way to learn is to fish all night, every night, and then you get to learn a lot of the conditions and things and what's going on with the river, and then you learn.
I only know of a few people who are still boning shad, though we have 3 generations now. Myself, my daughter, and my grandson, Kevin.
I don't see any other kids interested in learning how to bone.
Just really disappearing.